All right, folks, welcome everybody once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama and my good buddy Christian McCollum, who is on the mend after, such a horrible, drastic, intensive medical, catastrophe. Look at you. Look at you. You look great there, Christian. It's
Yeah,
good to
my
see you
friends and my
healthy.
wife, my friends and wife would say I had a belly ache for a couple days, and that's about the extent of it. But it was a serious belly ache. I'll be honest.
Well, no, let's talk about how that came about. See, this is a lesson to all of us here.
Yeah.
The reason it came about is you decided to get healthy.
I've been exercising. I haven't been drinking. I completely changed my diet. And the next thing you know, like I am just like breathing over in pain and can't work, can't do anything. And what's most annoying is when you go to the doctor and they ask you all these questions, they're just trying to find out information, but it's pretty annoying to like have to answer like, no, I don't drink. No, I don't smoke. Yes, I exercise. I eat healthy. I mean, I remember when I lived out there in South Bend, I wanted to get in better shape, and I would look it up, and they'd be like, maybe you should stop drinking. I'm like, eh. They're like, you should eat better. I was like, eh. They're like, you should exercise more. I'm like, you know what? I'll do that later. Forget this. And now I'm finally doing it, and now here you go. You get problems.
Well, it's something that I think all of us need to do. We just hope we don't, or at least some of us, me especially. But you just don't expect those kind of things to happen. All right, folks. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to Christian for coming on the show. Greg is not with us today because his daughter is playing in a big tournament championship in soccer. So go Greg and Greg's daughter, and hopefully they win it all. And we're going to be talking recruiting. So I thought, well, let's get Christian on here. He knows more about it than Uyeyama and I do, at least a little bit more about it. But so we thought we'd get him on here to talk because there's a lot going on with Notre Dame recruiting. Before we get going, I wanted to mention once again, it's a great day to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. You can go to the front page and click on the premium section and sign up today. Obviously, there's a lot going on with recruiting. We have stuff that's happening right now, a bunch of guys that are on campus and more coming. It's going to be a very busy month in June for official visits, unofficial visits, camps. We're going to get hopefully a bunch of commitments, and so that should be a very exciting month. So great time to sign up. Go to irishsportsdaily.com and click on the premium section and sign up. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade. Has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. And, of course, we have the Yama there, and he's wearing the L.A. Dodgers hat today. What happened to the A's?
I just switched it up. Just switched it up today, man. Yeah, that's what I do.
All right. All right. So how many baseball teams you have now? Aren't you a Mariners fan?
I'm just a Mariners fan. I say it all. I'm a new era guy. So I'm just a hat. I'm also, too, I like representing, because I'm from out west, so I represent teams out west there also too. This is like I don't consider the A's a competitor, so I just kind of and I like it's like a little bit of a throwback, even though I'm in the same division as the Mariners, and the Dodgers are, because they're a National League team, it's like I don't even really consider it. It's not like and it's weird with me in baseball. I just don't consider like a lot of the teams. Like I would never wear a Yankees cap. You won't catch me wearing a Yankees cap here. Or probably a Red Sox cap either. I just don't want to be one of those guys. Nothing against the Red Sox or whatever.
The Red Sox got the best logo. Red Sox got the best logo in all of baseball, I think, for their hats. I think it's just awesome. I really do. I love it.
It is a great hat.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, except you got to be from Boston and like that. And who wants to do that, right, Chris?
Yeah. Well, Red Sox. I mean, I understand you guys. You guys haven't really won anything, Jamie, ever.
No,
Mike,
ever.
You guys got one little small, paltry thing. I mean, the Red Sox.
Well, today I don't know if you noticed, but I am I am representing the 2025 NFL champions here today.
Oh yeah, sure.
Fear the roar. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen.
He says that now. Wait till we get on a text message. Someone asks him something goes wrong on the line.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be complaining. That's for sure. All right, folks. Well, let's get into it. There's lots going on right now, of course, with Notre Dame recruiting. Surprise, I guess, kind of visit jumped out at us over the weekend. We had heard about it, but we also heard that the player himself did not really want it out there. But now it is out there, and that is Kadon Finley, the wide receiver from Texas. A lot of people feel it's down to Notre Dame and Texas. Comes up for an unofficial visit. We'll be back, presumably, on the official visit that he has lined up as well here in a couple weeks. And you look at that and you say, "Oh, interesting that this guy comes up because he's expected to be back on campus here very, very soon." And what is it? I think his visit is his is on the 13th. So he's going to be back here in just another few days. And so, what do you make of this? What do you guys make of this?
So for me, like for a long time now, for several months, Notre Dame's had the edge here, right? And then, Texas became more and more of a player. And we referenced it a couple weeks ago in Intel where Texas was becoming more of a player, but even sources in Texas thought Notre Dame had a slight edge. And we kind of talked about how when sources in Texas say that, a slight edge usually means a little bit more than a slight edge, we'll say. That thinking since shifted, right? Texas now believes they're going to get them. I talked to a Texas source this morning before we hopped on this. And basically Texas, they don't love the entire wide receiver class this fall. They see him as the most complete guy, maybe not the number one guy in the country, but they see him as the number one guy in the state. And it's someone they do not want to let go. They feel like he's they cannot lose this guy. And it was interesting. The term we started talking NIL, and the term I heard was that Texas is going to be very reasonable when it comes to NIL, which I take to mean very generous when it comes to NIL. So obviously his dad played for Texas. We've reported before in Intel that, everything we know, mom is very big a fan of Notre Dame. How does that shake out? And, I think NIL is going to be a factor here. And I think coming up, he's already been up several times. That's one of the reasons why Notre Dame was considered a true front runner. So coming back, I think it's one more chance for him to figure out exactly what's going on. What it is about Notre Dame he likes ahead of the official, some interesting, one-on-one time, additional, intimate time with the coaching staff. And, I think he's just really trying to compare the two options right now, and getting up one more time when you have the means to do that doesn't hurt.
Yama, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we've always talked about, and I know we talked about it with Chris when we had him on Hidden Hustle a couple weeks ago, where we're talking about how a lot of these former NFL guys, they love the idea of their kid at Notre Dame. Well, I think one of the things, though, with some of those former NFL guys, their kid, it wasn't Texas or Georgia with Thomas Davis. So those two teams, they're rolling right now, just like Notre Dame's rolling, right? So I think that changes the dynamic a little bit. And that's something that, if they really push, which obviously that's happening right now with Finley and Davis, that makes it a lot more interesting. And I would say that that's something that you're going to have to deal with at some point anyways. That was always going to happen with maybe not these guys, but it's going to happen with some guys. And now you just see if they can kind of ride it out and kind of win out with it. I think it would be a lot easier to hang on to Thomas Davis when he's already committed than it is with Finley, where it's like, oh, he's been, leaning towards Notre Dame the whole time. And certainly I think I view him as an important guy for Notre Dame in this class. I would agree with, that kind of view of what Texas thinks of the wide receiver. I don't think the wide receiver class is that good in general. So that's something and everyone always needs wide receivers, right? So, and he's a complete guy. I think he's a guy who's got a very, very high floor. So, it's an important guy for Notre Dame. And obviously they're going to view it as such in terms of I'm sure they, rolled out the red carpet and did everything they needed to do this weekend. And we'll just kind of wait and see how it plays out.
I look at this as two ways, and I agree with you. I don't think that there's not many Henrys, the kid committed to Ohio State in this class. There's hardly any. The way I look at it is a couple ways, and if I'm kind of gauging where I think this is headed, this could be one of two things. One, it could be the positive side would be, this kid still is very interested, wanted to get back up to Notre Dame and not make a rash decision, and wanted to understand again why he likes Notre Dame so much. And Notre Dame did a good job of getting him to come up and check it out again, and then we'll see what happens. Or if you want to look at the negative part of it, it could be a situation where the kid just flat says, you know what, I want to go up to Notre Dame and just make sure that Texas is the place I want to be at. And I'm just going to come back and commit to Texas if something drastic doesn't happen at Notre Dame. We've seen players do that. We've seen that happen at Notre Dame as well. Where a guy will just go visit one last time, and just make sure that that's kind of the situation. And so we don't know. It could be one of those other two things. Now, the interesting thing, and I think you brought it up, Christian, is that this NIL situation. And this is where it's going to get really interesting for a lot of these teams, because you don't know what's going to happen with the settlement. You can't go too crazy on NIL because you don't know how all that's going to work out. You don't know whether everything's going to be approved. If it is approved, how much money you're going to have, all that type of stuff. You just don't know at this point. So you can't be too aggressive. But if I'm Notre Dame, I'm telling Kadon Finley, where's Texas been this whole time, right? Where have they been? You clearly were not their top guy. Now all of a sudden they're saying you're the top guy. We think you're the best player in the state of Texas, and we can't at wide receiver, and we can't let you go. Where were you the whole time? That would be my question. And if I was an NFL father, I understand. This is one thing I do understand. If a team believes in you, they will make you a priority. And as an NFL player, a team believing in you is very, very important. It is very, very important for that team to believe in you. And so I think that Notre Dame kind of has an ace in their back pocket on this, and they can hammer home. Where was Texas this whole time? I mean, everybody knows the situation. Texas, well, we're not sure whether Texas really likes Kadon Finley. There's never been any question in anybody's mind, and certainly not his, as to whether Notre Dame really likes him. And they've been recruiting him extremely heavy from the very word go, and it's been constant. And so I think that gives Notre Dame a chance. I really do. The negative to this, and I think that there's a couple of them, is that when you look at the quarterback situation, Texas is probably going to have what a lot of people would say would be the higher ranked quarterbacks coming in on the roster, ability to land others, those types of things. I think that, and then of course the dad angle and closeness to home. I think that those are things that Notre Dame's going to have to overcome. But if I'm a guy, like, I don't know, man, I've never understood how all of a sudden kids, they'll have a late offer. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go there. I think that the late offer thing, it rarely works out because where were you this whole entire time? Notre Dame's hoping it works out on some of these guys that they've late offered, but it's very difficult to do. And when you're a top player like Finley, I think it's tough to, I think Texas is going to have a hard time overcoming that when it's all said and done. And
I think, Mike, one more thing to add there, though, like I think it's a factor that NIL, obviously NIL, the dollars and cents matter, but it's also an opportunity for a program like you say, like Texas. So if I'm Texas and that's what you hit me with, I just say, hey, yeah, I hear you, whatever, but we're willing to put our money where our mouths are, right? So here's the NIL offer. It's on the table. We believe in you. We wouldn't offer you all this money if we didn't believe in you, So it does give a program like Texas a chance to kind of rebut, that line of argument, which isn't wrong, but, being able to, like I said, put your money where your mouth is another opportunity to just say, hey, yeah, all that stuff doesn't matter. We wouldn't be willing to offer you this money if we didn't believe in you.
Totally agree. 100% agree. But there's only so much money to go around, right?
Sure.
And so they're going to have to dig it out somehow. And they can't say, we're going to give you this money and we're going to come through with some NIL thing that's outside of the original 21 million because they don't know. They don't know how they could get it through the clearinghouse. You know what I mean? You don't know whether they're going to be able to approve this. So I think Notre Dame's in a good situation in that right now they don't know, or Texas can't say we're going to give you a crazy amount of money because they have the same amount of money as everybody else does right now. They just do. And, you can get some stuff through clearinghouse, hopefully, but you don't know how that thing's going to operate. And you don't want to put your whole program in a bad situation by offering too much money. And then the results of whatever this happens comes out and you're like, oh man, we just screwed ourselves, by trying to offer this one kid. So I think you got to be smart. I think Mike Martin's going to be smart in that regard. I don't know whether Texas will be. I guess we'll find out. Now, I think the same thing holds true with Thomas Davis. We know that Thomas Davis Jr. went on an official visit to Georgia. I don't think we know the outcome of that yet. I did some digging before I got on the show here trying to see if I could find anything out. I don't think there's been a result or a feeling on how that went so far. But I really think Georgia's going to be in a big problem too with this situation. You just can't come, the last minute and expect, it's especially, look, if I'm Thomas Davis Sr., I'm like, you've known about my kid forever. What the hell? All of a sudden now you're interested in him. I think Georgia's going to have a hard problem with this. Yama, your thoughts?
Well, he literally has the same name. It's right there. It's right there. You knew who he was. I do think that one, especially to me, like it's either he always dreamed of going there and that was like a slam dunk and then that will just pull him back or not, because it is something now because recruiting starts so much quicker. And when someone offers you like 2 years before like another program does, even if that is the dream offer, it's different today than it was before, where I think that used to happen where like, USC used to come over the top with some of these guys, like back when they were in the Pete Carroll days where they could do that with some of the California kids. Yeah. It's like, you can't do that anymore. You just can't, like, and that's why like Mater Dei was like a pipeline to USC. And now, like, I swear, anytime I read anything about a Mater Dei kid, it's like Alabama, Oregon, Texas, whatever. Like, I don't even think they care about it. It's definitely, obviously, they got a different head coach there too, right? So that's probably changes some things. But I do think that there's got to be something there where the kid has to kind of he has to be able to get over that. And if he can't get over that, and I know me, because I've been in situations too where like in sports where it's like, someone comes at you late and they're like, oh, well, now we changed our mind in this. And it's a turnoff. It is something that that's something you have to overcome. And unless you really, really want that. And hey, maybe I'll be wrong, but I just have a feeling that Thomas Davis is going to stick with Notre Dame.
I think this wasn't anything that shocked me. I spoke with Thomas a couple weeks ago after the Georgia offer. He told me he was locked in with Notre Dame, wrote a story on it. He did tell me at the time off the record that, he thought there was a chance he would take that visit. Me thinking, I think it's kind of out of respect for his dad more than anything. But I also talked to a Georgia source this week, and he echoed your comments, Mike. He's like, I don't know why Georgia's offering this guy so late. You know what I mean? Like they were under the impression he was going to stick with Notre Dame. And they also said that Georgia's in pretty good shape with some other linebacker targets. So going back to what I was saying about Finley, with Texas being able to kind of put their money where their mouth is, I don't think this is a situation where Georgia's going to do the same. So I don't think Georgia's going to offer him some overwhelming NIL package. And Notre Dame can use that argument about, where were they this whole time? And, we've been here, we've loved you. And, everything, Thomas, it wasn't one of those just get off the phone. Yes, I'm solid with Notre Dame. He wanted to talk about the official visit and how great it's going to be and how he's going to recruit other guys to come to Notre Dame. That was his main focus, truly his main focus when he spoke. So I agree with Jamie.
All right. Well, we got other visitors on campus here, and so this will be interesting. Jaden Warren and Alistair Vallejo Warren is a wide receiver that is kind of a new offer from Richardson, Texas. Kind of a guy that's blowing up right now. And again, I think it's because of what we've seen here with track times and things like that. We also have Ephraim White, another wide receiver who is committed right now to Florida State, a guy that has come up. Watch their films. And we mentioned Vallejo. Let's start with Jamie. Let's start. I don't know. I assume you've been able to watch the films of Jaden Warren and Ephraim White. What do you think on both those guys?
I mean, obviously, you see Warren has just like ridiculous, like high level track times, like probably like Olympic. Like this guy could be an Olympic sprinter. I got to tell you, it does not show that on film.
I agree, 100%.
It does not pop, and I think that's why, like Texas isn't after him, because I think if you're going to say like comparables, Chris will obviously remember Anthony Schwartz, who was like a super high level track guy who went to Florida. Notre Dame, targeted him, and he was a guy. It did pop. You could see him run and you're like, well, that's different. And I just don't see that with Warren. So, I mean, I think he's a guy because of that. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Those are ridiculous times. I think it's a guy you would take a chance on, but to me, he has a long way to go as a receiver. And I just kind of want to see, I'd like to see a little bit more. Maybe he looks like just dynamite as a senior. Because to me, if you look at White, the Florida State kid, he isn't obviously he's a track guy too, and he's got solid times, but he's got more juice to me. So he's skinny though, very skinny.
Yeah, that's what
and that's something that I think. So a lot like kind of like. Scrap Richardson in that way, where you're like Scrap Richardson came, still on obviously on campus right now. But when you look at him, when he got to Notre Dame, Scrap Richardson, you're like, he's going to need some time to get stronger and get bigger and stronger. And that's going to be a thing. And I think that's going to be a thing with White too. But just comparing them like film wise, I prefer White as a prospect.
It's interesting because a lot of people look at that time and they're like, oh, wow, this guy's really fast. But I watched the film as well. And I remember as soon as it was offered, I posted on the thread. I was like, this is a perfect example of a guy that track times just don't seem to show up on the field. Now, that doesn't mean that that won't happen this year. Maybe he suddenly got faster and got in the weight room and suddenly just became more of an explosive athlete. When you look at his stats, they're pretty darn impressive. I mean, he made a lot of big plays and scored touchdowns, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't show up on film as much as you think it would. And so that's the situation. Alistair, Vallejo, Christian, what do you think here? And what do you know about how much Notre Dame really wants this guy?
Yeah, I'd say they really want him. Over the last couple of weeks of intel, if you've read intel, you've noticed that, first we reported, we expect to see him on campus multiple times this month. That was a reference to this, relatively new released unofficial visit in advance of his official visit. Then we followed that up by saying there was some, rising optimism in terms of defensive line recruiting as a whole. That was when we got some information about some guys that were no longer on the board. They'd been informed by Notre Dame they were no longer on the board. Guys that were firmly on the board. So, after some more digging, we found out, Notre Dame, they feel pretty confident about Alistair. Now, this is not a done deal. Mike always says this is his first visit up there, right? So you never really know how a kid's going to like it until he gets there. He just arrived last night. So how does he like it? We don't know yet. But this is a pretty good, they're in a pretty good spot right now with another kid coming up, taking an unofficial visit before an official visit. I know his finalists are like Michigan and Kansas. For weeks, I've been told it's probably going to be Notre Dame, Michigan. Not surprising there. But I think Notre Dame is trending here. I think with the other guys being removed from the board, I don't think that was necessarily we got a commitment from this kid, so you're out. I think it was more of we feel better about the board overall, a lot of it due to our increased confidence in Alistair. And we want to be fair to other people and be straight up honest with them and let them know, hey, there might not be a spot for you. If you want to look somewhere else, you probably should. That being said, like I said, we won't really know for sure until he gets back from Notre Dame, how he felt about it. He does have a commitment scheduled for June 10th. So if things go well here, I think that, Notre Dame should have a very, very good chance of landing that commitment June 10th. And like I said, he's someone that, they want to take. They want this kid.
I think it's a situation. To me, it just, when you look at the timeline and how things are lined up, it almost seems like I don't know when his visit is to Michigan. I'd assume it's after June 10th, right?
Yeah.
I think it would have to be.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's a situation where he just needed to come up and make sure that Notre Dame was the place, and then he'll pull the trigger on June 10th, probably cancel the rest of his official visits and be in the class. I mean, just the timeline, that seems to be what makes sense the most. So we'll see what happens. Another guy coming up on June 4th is tight end Preston Frizzle, a kid from Toledo, Ohio. Watched his film, Yama. I think he's kind of a move tight end. A guy who probably not set out right now for the best inline blocker, but could potentially get there. I like the guy. I think he's a good offer. It's interesting because a lot of people said, well, what's going on with the offers? Do they feel, less about Premer and less about Jacobson? But no, that's not the case at all. I just think they want to make sure they get to, and there's no guarantee they're going to get Premer or Jacobson, and they may only get one. They may get none. So I do think you have to do your due diligence, but I do think Notre Dame feels like they have a real good shot at both those guys. With Jacobson, I think that Notre Dame probably has the best shot out of anybody. And with Premer, I think it comes down to, does the kid want to leave the state? If he leaves the state, it's going to be Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame feels pretty confident about that. It's just, does he want to leave the state? And I've never been in Great Bend, Kansas, but I've been around that area. It's rural, it's not, a lot of those types of kids, I think, like to stay closer to home. That's just kind of the way they are raised. So Notre Dame's going to have to overcome that. And I know Kansas State feel like they got a real good shot to land him as well. So, but let's get back to Frizzle. What do you think here?
Man, I like him a lot. Like, he is way underrated. I don't get his ranking at all. Like, obviously, he is just a big wide receiver right now. Like, he's going to have to, develop into a tight end. But you watch him, and man, he is a fluid athlete, great ball skills. I think he has a chance to develop into a stud. And then right away, too, I think when you look at Iowa, and that is the kind of guy who goes to Iowa and they put on 30, 40 pounds, and that guy is a high pick. And honestly, I watch him, and I think, like, just athletically, I think he is kind of Eifert-ish. Like, he is that type of guy. I don't know if he's going to be that good. Obviously, to be that good Eifert, I think, is one of the all-time great tight ends at Notre Dame. But honestly, just in terms of just when you see him move and you say he's different, like in terms of just like in and out of breaks, how he adjusts to the football, there's a lot of that. And I think, like, Chris will remember Grant Calcaterra, who was like a California kid who was like a skinny, like guy who played tight end at Oklahoma, and he was kind of a tweener, and then he ended up being like a pretty good player in college. He got hurt, and then he finished up. But similar in that way too, where you're like, this guy, I don't know if he's ever going to be a true big time blocker or whatever. You have to see, right? Like that's going to take some time. But if I'm going to compare him to some of the other guys that like Notre Dame has taken that have been those types of guys, to me, he's as good or better than most of those guys. Like, and I think he has a chance to be really, really good. So I totally understand why they would offer him. And to me, if they got Jacobson and him, I think that's a good class. Like I'm a fan of his.
Do you like him better than kind of the other recent offer that's out there in Braden Fogel, the guy who's ranked a little bit higher, has some kind of bigger names that are interested in him as well. Do you like him better than Fogel?
I think they're just different, right? So I like Fogel as well. I just think that, I would probably, I think I would probably prefer Frizzell. Like, I just think the upside is just a little bit more there, and he's just
especially if you get Jacobson.
If you could pair him with Jacobson, to me, that is like would be perfect. Because always I always thought that Jacobson was going to be more of like a traditional inline guy who has a chance to be a really, really good blocker. But he's got some receiving skills and stuff too, but I don't think he's never going to be a dynamic after the catch guy to me when I watch him.
I think that's why Iowa didn't offer him. Iowa did not offer Jacobson,
Yeah.
Which is surprising.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think, though, for what Notre Dame wants to run on offense, I'm like, he's a guy who fits. Like, when you're thinking about, like, filling up all of your, scholarships at tight end, you got to have a guy like Jacobson in your room. You do. Yeah. Just like Cooper Flanagan, right? Like, I don't think Cooper Flanagan, I think is going to, as long as he recovers well from his, Achilles and all that, he's going to play in the league. And I think he's going to play in the league for a long time. But he's going to be probably like a better version of Brock Wright. Like that kind of guy, but he's not.
Yeah,
but he's not going to be a super dynamic. Like, there's a difference between him and Raritan as athletes when you watch it.
Question.
And when I look at Frizzell, I think that's a guy that when we're talking about what Raritan can do, and obviously, Marcus Freeman was hyping him up like big time, which I think was justified based on everything we've seen and heard about him too. I think that's kind of the ceiling. Like, he can be that type of guy there. So I've when they offered him, always when you see that, and I know there's so many people that they immediately look at the ranking and they're like, look at this, and they're like, I don't know. To me, that's the total kind of guy that just a fit with that Jacobson. Like, if he was the only guy in the class, maybe I'd think a little bit different. But if he's the second guy, I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I liked about the timing of the offer is that there's all these showcases going on, right? Obviously, I went to a few earlier or last month in Massachusetts and Connecticut and other parts of the country do them. And so Mike Martin went to Central Catholic High School, same high school as Deshaun Kaiser, got to see Frizzell work out, run around and stuff like that, was obviously intrigued, right? Sometimes these guys, they run some crazy time, or they're just like super good that day. And coaches they don't believe it, right? I watched a kid last week. He ran a 4.36, and one of the coaches timed him, was like, yeah, run it again. He's like, my stopwatch didn't work. And the other coach was like, what'd you get? And they were all right around. They're like, damn. So Mike Martin went, saw him by himself. Then like a few days later, they had a showcase, and he kind of blew up then. He got Indiana, he got Miami, he got these other offers. So all these other coaches clearly saw what Mike Martin saw, and that was like confirmation, like, man, this kid is legit. He's moving around, he probably improved, all those times. So that evaluation was confirmed with multiple things. And I think that was like, really, really shows a lot in the offer.
Sorry, Mike.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add this in too, because I know that, Chris went to that, New England showcase where they kind of set that up. Why aren't more states doing this kind of thing and setting these kind of things up for so many of these kids to make it easier for these evaluations? And I think of they just had the sound mind, sound body thing in Detroit. I've been there before a couple of times. And the first year that I went, and that was when Ade Ogundeji was there. That's where they discovered him. And you could just see kids there where there was, I can't remember the name, but there was a kid, he went to Michigan, but he was a guy that everybody was talking to, everyone was after. And he was like, oh, I didn't bring cleats. And everyone's like, okay, come on, this guy. Immediately the guy just went down on my list. You didn't know you're going to compete today, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at Ade Ogundeji, and he's playing in the NFL, and he was a 3-star kid who was committed to, I think, Western Michigan, and, obviously earned a Notre Dame offer. And I think there's so many of those kind of showcases that just need to kind of be out there to help these guys. And it's really the best thing, because there's so many guys that are just kind of maybe you think everyone, everyone's got these big staffs nowadays. Kids fall through the cracks all the time. All the time. So
Well,
I just
can't
think
see
those
everybody.
things are so valuable. Yeah.
I think part of it is like for Connecticut, it started with the Connecticut prep schools, and they needed it, right? They needed
Yeah.
it. They had enough kids, but they didn't all have, they didn't each have 4 or 5 potential Power 5 guys. So, but together they did. So, the way they looked at it, I think, is like a rising tide lifts all boats. But that's in Connecticut, right? New Jersey prep schools, they ain't gonna, Bergen Catholic is probably not gonna work with St. Peter's Prep and Don Bosco and say, let's help each other out here, because they're competing with each other so much. And to be honest, I think that the Connecticut prep schools are definitely doing that now. They recruit just like these colleges do, and they're recruiting against each other. And I don't think they'll be able to stop the showcase. And it is a great thing for the kids, but you really, really need that buy-in and that cooperation from programs. Because you mentioned the Sound Mind, Sound Body. I don't know when that fell on the calendar, but remember, this isn't you cannot watch a kid work out. He has to be on his school campus. So you need to set it up in conjunction with, all right, you're going to start at Brunswick, and then you're going to go to Choate, and then you're going to go to Cheshire, so all those people need to work together. And it might be hard to find, in other parts of the country, schools that are willing to do that with their rivals.
Yeah. All right. I want to get to the, Chris, I just wanted to ask your thoughts here, because I think that the uncertainty is at 2 positions, and that is at wide receiver and tight end. We know that Vogel and Luke Sorensen have been offered kind of late, but so far, to our knowledge, neither is scheduled an official visit yet. So it'll be interesting to see if Notre Dame, has an opportunity to get either of those guys to take an official visit. Obviously with Frizzell, I think if he's going to come in and visit unofficially, as long as Notre Dame does some things, my guess is they'll probably hopefully get him back for an official. So they have that option. I'm sorry.
That is his plan.
Okay. So, we'll see with Fogel and Sorensen, but then you look at wide receiver and lots of names here that are kind of new. Cohen Brown, a guy that I like quite a bit. We know that Devin Fitzgerald is a guy that that has recently been offered as well. And you look at what official visits for him. I mean, next the 13th they have Brown, Kadon Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, Faison, and Braden Robinson, the smaller kid from Texas. He's coming, and then they have on the 20th they have Brian Williams coming on an official visit as well. I don't know. I mean, where do you think? Obviously Warren is up, and then we have the Ephraim White kid as well. I don't know. Where do you think that this is all going to unfold? I mean, who do you think that Notre Dame really has a shot at this point? And maybe who do you think they kind of like priority wise at this point?
Well, I think Cohen Brown is the first guy that jumps out. From everything, we've heard from both sides, from everyone around them, I think they have a really, really good shot. And, people down there aren't shy to say that Notre Dame's considered the front runner. Obviously, he's a kid who was committed to USC for a while, decommitted from USC. Interestingly enough, Texas, I was told that they weren't really going to be involved. And then the next, within that week, they came in strong. So, Texas, another school that's in for Cohen Brown. I know Baylor, you'll see Baylor mentioned for him. I was told flat out people would be shocked if he goes to Baylor. Ole Miss is also hanging around. But Cohen Brown is a kid that I know Notre Dame really likes, and he really likes Notre Dame. Devin Fitzgerald, you're talking about guys coming in late. Notre Dame came in late on him, but he was a kid that had been to Notre Dame so many times. At first, I remember when he started, showing up. At first, I think the first sign was like people were like, "What's Larry Fitzgerald doing here?" Right? So he's been coming for unofficial visits for quite a while, but he's starting to blow up. I mean, you talked about his other officials. He's at Clemson this weekend, got offered by Clemson, and so this is going to be a quick. He's got a decision announcement. I think it's July 5th. Maybe July 4th. But he's a kid this is going to go fast. And so Notre Dame's going to have to seal that deal. We already talked about Kadon. I think they have a good chance there, but it's not probably a little bit less than 50-50 at this point. Braden Robinson's a kid that Notre Dame felt like they had led for. And he pretty much said they led for quite a while. And now Notre Dame, they might have to battle Miami for him. And then Brian Williamson, another kid, right? It seems like a Notre Dame Florida battle. It's hard to say exactly how bad Notre Dame wants Brian Williams, but I think they do. And I had a source last week tell me that they think Notre Dame has the edge on Florida. Talked to a Florida guy who didn't necessarily dispute that, but couldn't say it himself. So I think those are the guys that they're most likely, starting with Cohen Brown, to kind of see how this all shakes out.
It's going to be interesting to see a tight end. I mean, do you know much about that situation and those new offers and where you think Notre Dame stands with those guys?
Yeah, like you guys said, I think their best position right now with Jacobson and Mike we've talked about before, but Premer, like you said, if he leaves the state, probably a good shot there. I had people tell me that they don't expect him to leave the state right from the beginning. So I kind of discount their chances there, probably a little bit more than others. But you guys were talking about Freisel. Like I said, from the same high school as Deshaun Kaiser, was a kid who had a top 5 at the beginning of May. But it was interestingly enough, it was labeled a top 5, not a final 5. And Notre Dame, when they came in, they just burst right through there. And like I said, his plan is to take that unofficial visit. I love it when a kid tells me something, and even if he doesn't have a firm date, then does it, right? A lot of kids, you're like, all right, you got offered by Notre Dame. What's next? Oh, I got to get up there to visit some point. Do you know when? No. And then they just kind of never get there. It seems like he was a kid where he said that. He's like, I don't know when, but, I want to get there soon. And if all goes well, I'll come back for an official. And here, he's coming up a couple weeks later for an unofficial. His interest is high. His coach told me you could see it in his eye when Mike Martin offered him that this one really meant something to him. So he's following through the steps of, what he said he was going to do. So I expect the unofficial visit to go well, for him to come back for an official, and then for them to have a really, really good chance at him. So I think he's kind of the one. Sorensen, he seemed excited when he first got offered, but there really hasn't been much development since. So those are the two that I have my eye on most, Jacobson and Freisel.
All right, yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot. 3 more receivers that Notre Dame can take. Who's the top 3 you want?
I mean, Finley is still there for me. I mean, we'll see what happens with it, but I still think that because he's a guy that is going to be. I think he's going to be a good player. So I agree. He's at the top of the list for me. I've kind of flip flopped with some of the other guys in terms of Robinson. I mean, I like him, but I think just because he got Bubba Frazier in the class too, and he is also, they're similar in a lot of ways. Obviously, both explosive athletes, but the size thing. So when you're taking 2 small guys in that one, I mean, I'll say Fitzgerald. I like Fitzgerald. I like him a lot. I think he's a guy who's going to get better and better too. And I would probably say Brian Williams, just because I think he's just like the most intriguing. I just think that there's a lot more there that he can do, and I really just like his ball skills. I think he's got great ball skills, and he's that different type, obviously size-wise, 6'4", super long levers, just a little bit different than everybody else. So probably those guys. I mean, obviously for a while we didn't know like what's going on with Brian Williams, but obviously they're in the mix for him. So I like him. I think he's an high upside kid.
Interesting, because I'm on the fence. I personally, I'm surprised you didn't pick Cohen Brown. I like Cohen Brown. I don't think he's an elite player, but I think he's a really good player.
I probably should have mentioned Brown as well. Actually, not to whatever, make it 4 or whatever. Yeah. I will say too that because Chris, great job on the story last week, Chris, on him. But it kind of even sold me even more on him. And I mean, like I said to last week when I was talking to Greg about it, I don't know how much that 500 squat is. He's this guy going basement. I need to see film of it. But still, but he's him. But anyone of that size, if you get a 500 squat. Let's just say he's not going basement. It means he's a 400 squat at that size. That's big time. That's big time. That's a powerful kid. So and I think he's a good receiver too. Like he tracks the ball really well.
Yeah, so for me, it was I agree with you. It's Kadon Finley, Cohen, Brown, and then the fifth one, I'm on the fence between Fitzgerald and Williams. And personally, I just think Fitzgerald's going to be a player. I just do, and I think that Brian Williams could be maybe even have a better career than Fitzgerald when it's all said and done. But I wouldn't bank on that, right? I think he's more raw, so I'd probably go with Fitzgerald over Brian Williams, and those would be my five. So, all right. The last topic I want to get to before we get to a few questions is the 2027 quarterback situation. A lot of people are going on and on about this, and I totally 100% understand why there's frustration there, and nobody's sure what is going on. The good news, June 5th, we've got Teddy Gerard coming, which 2027 quarterback, and then on we also have Jameson Purcell and Malachi Ziegler coming as well. And so those are three 2027 guys that should be up and throwing for Notre Dame. A lot of people are kind of, in an uproar over why they haven't offered these guys. But I think last week we talked about it, Jamie. Who do you love? And if you're not 100% sold, who do you love? And so I think that they're trying to bring some guys up. I think in Gerard's case, I think they really like him. And I don't think that they're necessarily questioning whether he can be, the type of guy they want. They just want him up there to see how interested he is because he hasn't visited yet. With Ziegler, I think they bring him up because as much talent as he shows, we talked about it last week, Jamie, the production just isn't there. We just don't see the big numbers that you'd expect to see. So my guess is they probably want him to throw a little bit, throw to some of these wide receivers that are there, get a look at him and see what he looks like there. I think it's smart because none of these kids are committing at this point. No, they're not losing out on anybody at this point so far. That doesn't mean that isn't going to happen, but they're not losing out on anybody at this point. And if you can make sure you make the right decision and you don't lose out on any of your opportunities, then, there's no reason to rush this situation. But sooner or later, they're going to start losing on some guys and they're going to have to make some decisions. But the good news, as I said, is that these guys are coming up. I think my guess is this is probably going to be the last of it, and then we'll start to see some offers. But what do you think here, Jamie, about the situation? And I've looked at a bunch of them. I mean, who do you like? Who do you like as these quarterbacks for 2027?
Yeah, I think I like quite a few of them. I just, as we kind of mentioned before, I don't really love any of them, and that's kind of where we're at. But I like Teddy Gerard. I think he's a good player. He's a good athlete. He's got a really good feel for the rush, throws well on the run. To me, he's like a more mobile Steve Angeli type. A better athlete, escapes better. Malachi Ziegler, I have a feeling he is going to get an offer as long as everything checks out off the field in terms of what they like. Because I think he's someone that when I've seen him, everything that I've seen, the ball comes out of his hand like it pops. And he's a good athlete, and that is definitely, you need to have better film out there and all that, but I think that's one of those things where you're talking about the projection. So if he comes out and he has a good workout, I mean, to me, he's a no-brainer as one of the top guys. Purcell is going to be interesting because I look at him, and he's another good athlete, a little bit like Cade McNown, a little bit. Remember the old UCLA kid? Yeah. But also, he just doesn't. He's a lefty. I would definitely want to see him throw in person because it does not look like he's got a ton of zip on the ball. So I would want to see him in person. We're going to see him in person. So we'll see there. But if he checks out that way, like he's a really kind of like dynamic little dude who, kind of has and also too, I want to know how big he is because he looks smaller than where he's listed at. So I would want to kind of know that too. I like the two New England kids that Chris has seen quite a bit of, Peter Bork and Keegan Croucher. I think I like Keegan Croucher more than Bork. Just in terms of just maybe like upside just a little bit, because I just think he's a little bit more dynamic athlete. But I think Bork is a good player too. Like, to me, when I've watched some of those guys, I think both of those guys I would put, in terms of other New England guys, you compare them, they're better than Hebert to me. Like, I think those guys are better prospects than them. So there's some guys out there that obviously have like interest in Notre Dame. Oh gosh, the names escape me right now, but the other kid, he was brought up last week on, I think, the kid from Arkansas or whatever. Yeah, he's a good player too. Like, we'll see, like, what happens with him, but I just think there's a lot of these guys that you just want to pick the right guys that you think are going to have that big jump as a junior, because for me, all these guys, none of these guys look like the capital all caps elite guys as sophomores. So who do you think could make that big jump as a junior? And that's really kind of going to be what it comes down to.
I think with Ziegler, it's what you have in front of him. You know what I mean? So like, you just don't know what you have in front of him right now, as far as and Ebert and Grubbs. And so, I think they'd probably want to make sure that they get a big time guy if they can. But at the same time, we talked about this last week, Jamie. I go with a high upside guy, and I'll tell you why. Because the high upside guy has a chance to be a really, really good player. And if you feel like you can coach, you should be able to bring that out of him. And you have some other guys in front of him that are high upside guys. You got to figure, if you're a good coach, you can get one of those guys to be able to succeed. If you don't, you're going to be in the portal anyway. So, it doesn't do you any good to take a guy that's just kind of like a their guy, and I no disrespect at all to like Steve Angeli, but that's the kind of guy that I think that they're probably going to get in this 2027 class, unless, I shouldn't say, I think that the level of talent is Steve Angeli-esque in a lot of these guys. I think some of them are a little bit better and have a bigger upside than Angeli, but I think they're all kind of, that type of player. So, you've already decided that that's not what you're looking for. So you may as well, if this doesn't work out, go into the portal. And so I would go with a high upside guy. I just do. And so we'll see what it all, how it all unfolds and go from there. Obviously they've set it up with these visits. They're going to have more guys come in that we don't know about for invasion and all these types of stuff. We don't have a full list, and I think as things get closer, we'll have more understanding of who's coming in. But I like where they're headed. I like where they're at right now as far as their official visits. I think they're in a good shape there. I don't like that Ian Premer, is coming on midweek, and Talanoa Ely as well. But, those guys are either going to decide or they're not going to, one of the two. I don't think Ely's kind of the guy that's looking for the big party, but at the same time, I think that a lot of those guys coming from Hawaii, they want to, be around the guys, and there's just not going to be a big list there of guys that are going to be his classmates. And so that hurts, but they do have the Polynesian connection. I think that they'll surround him with a lot of those types of players and guys from Hawaii. They have a lot of those guys on the roster. So hopefully they'll be able to at least make some moves. But last thing, corner, I think that's the other position that everybody's a little bit concerned about. I don't know, Chris, what do you think here with Joey O'Brien? What do you think with Kari Adams? There's just not a lot of, there's no room for error here, as far as, there just really isn't. And, some people said, oh, well, Chaston Smith may even take a visit or two. I don't think that's going to happen. At least I don't know that. But if he took a visit, wow, they would be in trouble. Your thoughts here on this?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, they're putting a lot of eggs in those baskets right now. And I think there's very real reasons for optimism. But there's also, these guys are elite players. When we get down to, recruiting these elite guys, that are top of the board for different programs. It's tough, you know what I mean? Especially, you're usually going to be going out of state like they are with both here. And obviously, Joey O'Brien, it seems like it's been Notre Dame, Penn State. Very difficult kid to get a read on. You're reading a lot of tea leaves and stuff like that with him. He doesn't give a lot away. Does Notre Dame have a great chance of landing him? Yeah. Is he a lock to land at Notre Dame? No, not in my opinion. Very similar with Adams. He's a kid. He's been up multiple times, been a top target for Notre Dame for a very long time, says a lot of the right things. I have no doubt his interest in Notre Dame is very genuine, but Oregon's another school out there that's, really, really got his attention. So, and where do you go from there? If you miss on those guys, it's hard to really say. And you're not really, like, again, with those elite guys, you're not going to go say, oh, let's go find a kid like at an Ohio showcase, like Preston Freisel, who's also got this upside.
Yeah.
You're not finding someone else that's going to, oh, we missed out on Joey O'Brien, but we got this guy that we hadn't heard of. You're not finding that level comparison like you are at other positions. So, like you said, there's a lot riding on both those recruits.
Well, and this is where it comes down to it. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the show, is that you need a Joey O'Brien and you need a Kari Adams and you need a Leonard Moore and all these types of guys, because Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith. They're going to have Henry playing with Smith. Who the hell's going to cover those guys? And Ohio State's going to have a whole bunch of other guys that are out there like that. So everybody will sit and say, well, it's all right if you miss on it. No, it's not. Not if you want to win the national championship. And again, this is not Mike being negative. It's the bar's raised, folks. This is where we want to be. All right. And look, it's funny because a lot of guys, I've heard some people say, well, we don't have to win it every year, or we don't have. Well, I sure hope Marcus Freeman isn't feeling that way. I sure hope the team isn't feeling that way. You want somebody that's going to want to win it every single year. And that's Ohio State's mentality. That's Georgia's mentality. That's Bama. That's Texas. That's everybody's mentality. Irish fans can't have that mentality, right? This is where you need to be. And in order to compete against these top players, you need players like Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams. You just do. And I do think it helps that Penn State's taken a few guys. I don't think Joey O'Brien's going to be afraid of
He's
those
not going to
guys.
be scared off, yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's only so many spots that Penn State can have, and I don't know. We'll have to see how it all unfolds. But you're taking a gamble. The way I look at it, you're taking a gamble by just having that small of a list. And let's be honest. Mike Mickens has done a great job of recruiting, and he usually gets his guys. But as I've mentioned before, I think that the looking at other jobs thing, I think that hurts him a little bit. I just do. And I think it's obvious that there's just not a lot of options right now. So I am surprised there aren't more guys that are, on the list. We've seen it at tight end. They've expanded. We've seen it at wide receiver. They've expanded. I'm surprised there isn't that situation at corner. And, if they don't get them, I guess we'll see. They got some good ones last year, so I'm not overly concerned. It's not the end of the world, but you need to get good players every single year. All right. Go. I got some questions here. If we're slipping on Finley, will it be Williams or Fitzgerald to fill the void? With a smaller overall roster, we'll be able to field a Navy triple team option practice squad. Seems like the walk-on who ran the scat team offense really helped us last year versus Navy and Army. I think that's certainly a legit question as far as, if you're losing some walk-ons, will they do it? But I think that they've already kind of talked about grandfathering in the walk-ons. And I think that once they grandfather it in, they'll have a whole nother year to make their case that they need to have a larger roster. And again, I think that the problem too is, some of the smaller schools are like, well, we can't afford to give scholarships and pay all these guys like the guys at Notre Dame and Ohio State and all these other things. So there's a lot of argument there as far as, how many can you have that are scholarship? How many can you, to me, I would think 95, maybe 105 is a good scholarship number, and then fill it out with walk-ons. But I do think you need a roster of about 120 guys, and I'm sure that that's what we're going to see. A lot of these teams still continue to push for, and they'll have a whole nother year before they have to really kind of battle this, and I'm sure they'll have some success. It seems like usually when the big guys want something, they'll end up getting it. That's just the way it usually seems to be. As far as the Finley thing, I don't know whether it's going to be Williams or Fitzgerald to fill that void. Hopefully they don't lose Finley, and we'll see what happens. Are the players back on campus 6-2? If not, when do they return? I'm not exactly sure when they come. Is it? It's not now. I think it's the next week, isn't it? Is it the next week that
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I think it is, but I could be wrong. So, all right. Has there been any definitive report or clear indications how ND plans to allocate the $20 million playoff money? How many recruits coming over Notre Dame on official visits pay all their own expenses for a visit? As far as how they're going to use the $20 million that they earned, first of all, it wasn't $20 million; it was $32 million they earned from the playoff run. How they're going to use that, I don't know. They've certainly hired some new staff. I'm sure Mike Martin didn't come cheap, and I'm sure some of these other guys didn't come cheap as well. And you want to keep your guys. Some of the assistant coaches that Notre Dame has are getting paid pretty well right now. And so, and I think that obviously you have to give some money to the other programs. So I would guess that would be the case. All right. Is ND a legitimate championship contender with a first-time starting quarterback, or is this just a growth year before 2026? What do you think there, Yama?
I think the uniqueness of the year in terms of not having, like a marquee quarterbacks return. There are no guys. There is no Caleb Williams coming back, or there's no Trevor Lawrence or, Justin Fields. These guys that are like established, CJ Stroud, where they're established as like these elite guys that they're going to be like leading these elite programs. So many of these teams have new quarterbacks, right? Like we don't know how Gunnar Stockton, excuse me.
I don't know.
Tyler Stockton. I mean, he's looking slim these days. Maybe he could play quarterback. Yeah, but we don't know what Gunnar Stockton is going to be. Like DJ Lagway might be awesome at Florida. Does Florida have a team? They have a squad that's going to be whatever. Like, who's betting on Drew Aller after the egg that he laid against Notre Dame? And really, he played bad in all three of the CFP games, right? And that's how you look at like Oklahoma went and they paid all that money for Mateer. It's like, did you look who Washington State played on the schedule last year? Like they didn't play, they played like a group of 5 schedule. So I don't know how good that guy's going to be. Somebody is going to turn into Cam Ward, I'm sure, right? There'll be somebody there, but I don't know who that's going to be. And
maybe
no
it's
one would have
CJ
said
Carr or Minchie. Maybe it's CJ Carr or Minchie.
And nobody said Will Howard was going to be like lights out at the end of the year and playing at just a crazy elite level. So I think it all depends on whoever the quarterback is. That guy is like by the end of the year is playing at an elite level, because you can go through, even though they got the first 2 games are going to be tough. Well, I don't imagine that Carr or Minchie is going to light the world on fire in the first couple of games. It just matters that they do enough to win those games and not enough to lose it. That's what matters those early. But then all of a sudden at the end of the year, like if you get into the USC game, middle of the season, you want your quarterback to be cooking at that point. Things are brewing and things are going there. So to me, it is on the table this year that they could do that, but certainly they're set up well for 2026 as well.
All right. Who here is dreading the inevitable, unbelievable media fellatio over Archie Manning this entire year? I mean, I remember the funny thing is I liked Peyton Manning as a person. I liked his dad. I liked his brother. I got so sick of the Peyton Manning thing. I just couldn't handle it. And that was before all this crap that they have now as far as social media and stuff like that goes. So that's going to be insufferable, and it's going to be hard to watch some of this, and it'll be interesting to see how good he is. I've watched him, and when he's played, and at times he looks great, at times he doesn't. I don't think it's a slam dunk that this kid's going to be a first round draft pick and the first player in the draft and all the things that they're saying. I think he
might be.
Good.
He just might not be that guy this year, right?
Yeah, sure. So we'll see what it all. Go ahead.
I had multiple people in the recruiting process during back then tell me straight up, their words were like, Arch ain't that good. Now, they didn't mean he wasn't good. They just meant like he wasn't like what everyone put him out to be. If his name wasn't Manning, obviously. I heard from one of our friends at LSU that Brian Kelly didn't even have him as the number one quarterback in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
That year. Now, it's also one of those things like I like to try to caution people like, it's going to be real annoying to get Arch Manning shoved down your throat every day, all week. But don't blame the kid, right? Don't hate the kid.
Yeah, amen. It's not his fault.
He's handled that pretty well the whole time.
Very well,
yes. It will be, like I said, annoying, but, don't let that fall into you deciding to hate on the kid.
I agree because as I've mentioned many times on this show, the Manning family are as cool of people you'll ever meet. My favorite family probably of anybody that I've covered and I didn't get to cover them very long, but both kids were just such respectful, just very mature, good people. And I loved Arch Manning. I've told the story many times about, when Peyton was being recruited, and this was way back in the pager days. They didn't even have cell phones back then. And I remember I called and I talked to Arch on the phone. I said, Mr. Manning, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And he's like, first of all, my name's Archie. Don't call me, Mr. Manning and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, Mike, he said, here, I want to do something before we get going. He's like, I want to give you my pager number. And I said, well, okay, why? And he said, look, I want you to call me. The second, if Peyton is even remotely rude to you in any way at all, I want you to call me and I will take care of it. And I said, well, I can't imagine he would be that way. And he said, well, I don't think so either. He said, but the hype is just out of control. And he said, for anybody, it's hard to handle this. He said, I'm just trying to protect my kid and my family. And I just want him to represent our family well. And if there's any indication that he's rude to you and even the slightest, I want you to text me right away or, page me and I will take care of it. And I just said, it's the only time that's ever happened to me. And all the times, the freaking millions of kids that I called. And it was I just gained so much respect for them. And then every single time I'd call, he remembered my name. I'm like, how does Archie Manning remember my name? It was amazing to see and just such a great family. But anyway, let's get back to the questions. All right. Plan 2 quarterbacks. Marcus Freeman mentioned in the McElroy situation that may be a possibility. I don't think it's a situation where this guy gets this series, that guy gets that series. I don't think that's what they were talking about. But, maybe you put in, if Carr is a guy, you put in Minchie in goal line situations or short yardage or something like that. I don't know. What do you think there, Jamie? You like that idea?
I mean, I think it's good to kind of open that up because let's say Carr wins the job, and I know most people are thinking that Carr is going to win the job. Like it's just it's very much swung that way, and a lot of people have felt that way basically since he got recruited, right? But you got to keep Minchie. You got to keep him engaged. So that is also one way to even just talk about that as a possibility. If he doesn't win the job, that it's like there's that, and also he's good, like he's valuable, and he could offer something there that Carr couldn't. He is a better runner than Carr. So, and then you don't know. Carr could come in and struggle, and you at least have some guy to get some snaps. And, whether or not he's going to go back and sling it, he's had some snaps in there. He's been in games. So I don't think like you said, I no way it's going to be like hey, well, you get every second series or every third. No, not like that. I think it would be way more of like situational.
All right. Question for me. Are you confident this June goes differently than last summer recruiting wise? Yeah, it's going to go better for sure. There's no doubt. I think that there's a few positions that I'm just concerned about. Tight end. Is it a bust if Bremer doesn't come and they get Jacobson and somebody else? Probably not. And I like Frizel. I think he's a good player. I wouldn't be that bummed if I didn't get him. But I think Bremer has the length that you'd like. He has the body, I think, that could develop into, first round draft choice body. But I think that they'll probably get, Jacobson and Frizel if they don't get Bremer. That's not terrible. And I wouldn't say it's elite, but I would say it's pretty solid. It's pretty good. I'd be pretty happy with that. At wide receiver, do they lose Kadon Finley? Do they lose Cohen Brown? I think that those two guys are kind of for me, they're kind of the test. And I would hate to lose Kadon Finley because I think he's a really talented player. And I think he's kind of a great house, a guy that's going to come in and play early. He's got the body for it. He runs good routes. He's got great hands. I think he's a guy that's going to come in and play early. And you need guys like that. You need guys. So, especially because, Great House could be gone after this year for all we know. We know Fields will be gone. Pauling will be gone. Faison will probably be back, but who knows? He could have a monster year and be gone too. So I think it's important to land guys that can come in and play right away. So that's why, to me, I think that Finley is really, really important to this class. And then corner. I think corner is the question mark. If you get Joey O'Brien to go with these guys, I love it. If you get Kari Adams and not Joey O'Brien, I still love it. If you land both of them, I mean, that's as big a home run as you could possibly ask for. Yeah, I mean, that's just so it just until I know. But those are really the three positions I think everything's hanging on. They'll get, they're going to get one of the two linemen. I think that they'll get one of those two. They're going to do great at wide receiver. At defensive line. So I'm not overly concerned. I think everything's going to work out the way it should. It's just there's a few people that are just kind of the linchpin to me as far as how great this class can be. In an alternate universe, Indy pulls it out versus OSU and wins the national title. What do you think is different with the program today if this happened? Thinking recruiting, investment of the program, Marcus being asked for and get even more of what he wants. Would like to hear from you all on this. I think recruiting may be a little bit better. Maybe just a shade better. With a national championship, they may have even got a little bit more interest. Investment of the program, I don't think that's a problem at all. As far as Notre Dame investing into the program, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think mostly whatever Marcus wants, he gets. And I don't think Marcus is somebody who over asks either. And I think that the people respect that. And so I think Marcus Freeman's very, very smart that when he wants something, he gets it and pushes for it and gets it, but he's not somebody that's just going to keep pushing and now we need this, now we need that. Now it has to be a good situation for everybody, and I think he's very smart in that regard. Anything you guys want to add, Jamie or Chris?
I think, I pretty much agree with everything you said, Mike. You get obviously a little bit of a bump from winning a national championship, recruiting wise, but I don't know, like they already kind of, if like say Chad left and there was all that kind of change, I still think there would have been a little bit of a lull there just because of all that change anyways. So maybe they get a couple more guys to visit that wouldn't have got to visit. I think that was like some big time guys that I think they, probably were really interested in, but they didn't have as much interest. That would have been a thing. But investment in the program, like I just think that they're, especially because of the way the playoff went and the steps towards it, it wasn't just going to the national championship game and losing. it was like winning all those games to get there. And then also where it looked like, hey, this could be a blowout. Like, oh, all of a sudden it's a game in the fourth quarter. I think that's just one of those things that just for everyone who was already a believer in Marcus Freeman, they were like, here's the check. You know, like they already were going to invest anyways and put that in. And there's so many people Vacco included, that are just dying for Notre Dame to win a national championship. And they have a belief that Marcus Freeman is the guy to get there. So I think maybe the investment was even more, because it's like, well, they, we're so close. We've got to get over the hump. Here's this.
Yeah. The goal is to win.
Let me ask you this question. Go ahead.
The goal is to win a national championship. Don't let me say like, oh, it's a good they didn't win it or anything like that. It's not. That's the goal. But trust me, that's the goal. So when you reach that goal, like Jamie said, the investment in the program would probably be less, right? There's going to be people, they don't need to. But a lot of these donors that are writing checks, they just want to see Notre Dame win a national championship before they die. If that happens, the checks would probably be lighter. I do think you would be a huge, I don't know if they would equate to results, but you got a huge bump in recruiting because, there would have been movies essentially about it, right? Maybe not real Hollywood movies, but like 30 for 30s, documentaries, books. Notre Dame would have been shoved down everyone's throat the same way Archie Manning was, and that would have resulted in recruits being like, "Oh, damn, like Notre Dame's really it now." So that would have been a positive, but distractions would have been a big deal. Like there would have been, Marcus Freeman would have been distracted.
Yeah,
he'd have been pulled. He'd been on Good Morning America. Forget about podcast with Greg McElroy, stuff like that. So I think they're probably better positioned now to win a national championship in the future than if they had already won one, if that makes sense.
No, I think you're absolutely right in that they know now what it takes to get there, and they're going to be hungry. They're going to be even more hungry. Question for you real quick. Is there any coach in the country you would trade Marcus Freeman for? Not one for me. There's not one head coach I'd trade Marcus Freeman for. I really wouldn't.
At Notre Dame, no.
At Notre Dame, that's my caveat too.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to become a pretty big Dan Lanning fan. And I don't really like him personally, or at least I didn't.
But what he's done,
he's growing on me.
I think I absolutely agree too that if you're going to pick a guy, because you'd also pick a young up and coming guy that you think is going to be there. The way that he's kind of invested himself into the program, what they've done recruiting wise, obviously, I think he's used Oregon's resources better than any coach they've ever had. And it's just absolutely, because they've always had this like funnel of money that was ready to go. And it's not like guys like Cristobal and, Chip Kelly to a certain extent too. It's not like they didn't take advantage of it. They did, but not in the same way that he's doing, where honestly, like as long as he is there, I kind of feel they'll be a national title contender. Like they should be on the list every year.
Yeah.
Watch for him to go to Alabama.
Well, we'll see. So here's the situation. A guy wants to know who our first game, the first Notre Dame game we actually attended, and then what was our favorite game. I don't know if he meant favorite game we attended or whether it was our favorite game overall. First game at Notre Dame and your favorite game, mine being the Snow Bowl in 92. My first game was actually a spring game. I went to a spring game because back then there was no internet, so there was really no way to get tickets. I was in Omaha and I didn't know any Notre Dame fans. I didn't know anything. So we went to a spring game, and this was way back when where the field is, where the lacrosse and stadium is. That's really where the spring game was held. That's where they used to practice and all that type of stuff. So that's the first game I guess I went to. And then I think the next one that I actually went to that was, I don't think it was a Georgia Tech. I can't even remember who it was. If it's an in-home game or an actual game I went to, I'd say my favorite game was probably the Michigan game where they just got blown out by BYU and it looked like they were going to get crushed against Michigan. and then they came back and won, and it was a Darius Walker game. And I'll never forget, back then you used to be able to get on the field as a video guy, and I was on the field for that game. Chris, I think were you up in the booth? It would have been you, right?
No, not Darius Walker.
This was even before you?
Yeah.
Okay. This is even before you. And I remember video cameras would just come around, and I remember going in front of the student section, putting my, because the game was over, and went in front of the student section and just filmed that, and you would not believe the roar. That was the loudest I'd ever seen Notre Dame Stadium. It was just rocking. It was so incredible. So that was probably my favorite game as far as that goes. And I hate to say it, but I would say probably my favorite game was a loss. And I know that's hard to believe, but I thought the 2005 or 2005 USC Notre Dame game, that had, other than the very end, that was the greatest game. It was just so much fun to watch. Probably because nobody expected Notre Dame to really have a chance. Well, I shouldn't say. We thought that they'd have a chance. We just didn't know it. And then they played like lions in that game. I mean, so to me, that was the most fun to watch with the worst ending. Let's start with you, Jamie.
First Notre Dame game I went to was 2005. It was at Stanford when, they had to win that game to go to the Fiesta Bowl. My girlfriend, now my wife, of course, had to keep her after she bought tickets.
Yes.
She's like, I bought tickets. We're going to San Francisco, and then we're going to go to this Notre Dame game because she knew I'd never been to a game. So that was the first game I went to, which was way too close of a game for that. They should have smoked that Stanford team.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. A great Charlie Weiss, the old, Chris knows this, the New England Patriot, this direct snap.
Oh, yeah.
There was a great, that
right?
in there too. Yeah. To Darius Walker in that game too. And okay. Like I would say, honestly, like covering a game, the Indiana, the first playoff game, it was pretty cool to be there.
Yeah.
In person, just because you could just feel the campus, everything around there. You could just feel the energy. And Notre Dame, I mean, the love touchdown run and how that just like ignited. And there was that energy there was, I would say it also too would be close to the loss the Ohio State game the year before. Yeah. The energy for that game was insane. I think it was easily the best energy whenever I've ever seen in Notre Dame Stadium. Just ended horribly for Notre Dame fans, but that kind of thing was like, it was a special type of energy for them and then to win that, that first playoff game was, I think that was like just like a cool experience for anyone who was there covering the game, at the game as a fan, whatever. As a fan, I was at the 2012 Pitt game, which obviously it had a lot of ups and downs that game. Ray Graham, man, he had a day early in that game too. But I just remember, I'll never forget this. I heckled a guy who was there with his kids, and Notre Dame was losing, and he's like, they're, I don't know, going to beat the traffic. And I was like, boo, your kid's always going to hate you for the rest of your life, because I had a few pops in me in that time. But, and you know what? I was right, because it was obviously a comeback. They came back, won the game. They won it overtime. And that's a game that you like tell people about, like, yeah, I was at that game, right? Like
crazy game.
But that
was a crazy game.
Yeah, it was a crazy game. A lot of ups and downs in that game. And too bad for that guy whose kid probably hates him forever.
Chris.
My first game was My first game was Notre Dame, Florida State in like 03, I think it was. They got absolutely shellacked. They got beat like 37-0.
Oh yeah,
that was gross. And then I can kind of piggyback on Mike. I'm going to cheat a little bit. My favorite game at Notre Dame Stadium was 05 USC. We didn't even go to the game. I think people on the board that know. I played high school football with Nick Bonacani, a couple of his nephews. And so one of my buddies and him and one of his nephews is a good buddy of mine. They have a big Nick Bonacani, Mark Bonacani Foundation dinner every year. I mean, everyone's there. It's like at the Waldorf Astoria. Every Michael Jordan level people are there. So my buddy, he's like, yeah, I met this guy at my Uncle Sting. He's a Notre Dame grad. He said anytime you need tickets to just look him up. And he's got a white flag and he's tailgating. So we drove from Massachusetts to South Bend with no tickets, completely convinced we were going to find this random guy and that he was going to have tickets for us to go to this game. We didn't even have the guy's phone number. So we drove out there, and eventually we realized that we ain't getting into this game. There's no shot. And I'll never forget, we were like last minute. We waited till last minute, and we didn't know if we should watch it in the Joyce or at the Morris Inn. Those were our two options. And I stopped a priest, like all hurried. Father, where should we watch the game? Should we go to the Joyce or the Morris Inn? And he just looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, the Morris Inn. And I was like, why do you say that so surely? He goes, the booze. They don't serve booze in the Joyce. So we went to the Morris Inn. We sat there. We had one of the greatest experiences watching a game of our life. Somehow Johnny Latner's Heisman was getting passed around. We were holding it. We were partying. We had a great game, and all the way up until the very end, like Mike said. So that was a wonderful experience.
It was a great the tailgate was amazing. We had, I mean, everything was just, it was so electric that whole entire day. It was just such a fun day until the end. So yep. I just, that's what it was. Okay, well, I think we have one more question here. Can you give us a player comp for Carr and Minchie for a couple of factors: mobility, arm strength, improvisation? Not what they will become, but where they are. Who do they remind you of? Let's start with you, Jamie, or we'll just have you do it.
Well, I mean, believe me, when I'm very specific about this, 2021 version of Kenny Pickett at Pitt is CJ Carr. Not any other version. Every other version was trash. NFL.
Trash. Come on, that's Kenny football you're talking about. Not every version.
That's your buddy. Okay. That's your buddy.
Other than San Antonio All-American Combine, he had a nice day. But
you were such a Kenny Pickett hater until that last year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You hated it.
Well,
you hated it.
He was check down Kenny, and guess what? He proved to be check down Kenny in the pros.
Exactly.
But when that year he had Jordan Addison. He was, and that was the year where he was just, I think, escaping the pocket, handled it, just accurate, downfield, was super accurate, had that kind of poise, and obviously he was a sixth-year guy, so that was like kind of there. But that's what I kind of think that CJ Carr, that level, and obviously he became a first-round pick. He was a great player that year. That CJ Carr, I think his skill set, when you're talking about all of those kind of things, probably a more live arm too. I would say CJ's got a more live arm than Kenny ever had. But that's what I would say. And then Minchie, I think, is so interesting because he's such a more dynamic runner than I ever thought he was going to be. And I think that kind of adds to it. So it's a tough one.
I can't really think of anybody.
I can't think of anybody that would be like just a super specific guy that like really kind of stands out to me with all of it that he had. I mean, God, I mean, people are gonna say that I said now this is what happens. Then they're gonna start saying, but it's kind of Jaden Daniels.
Oh,
it's kind of Jaden Daniels because he does have. Because, I mean, he's got the deep ball arm. Like, I mean, he can put it. He can drop it in a bucket. He's got that running ability. He might not be quite as dynamic as Daniels, because Daniels is pretty special there. But you can see why, if you're Mike Denbrock, why you would be so intrigued by being like, oh man, why you can't just give it to Carr, because that I think is Minchie. There's a possibility he's that type of player, right? So who are you thinking of, Chris?
Well,
I thought you were going to say like a lower version of Mahomes, like with his arm being a gunslinger, like not that level. But I didn't realize that you thought he was that.
Well, there's
dynamic.
a college Mahomes. You know what I mean?
College Mahomes is pretty crazy too, though. You know?
Yeah.
You find out a lot about. I'll tell you, you find out a lot about these guys in college fantasy football. Like one of the guys had, Patrick Mahomes in college fantasy, and he just went nuts. And same thing with Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels won me a college football fantasy title. That guy was crazy dynamic. I mean, he would go 80. Like you think Kenny Minchie can go 80?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's. I
think he can.
Maybe. I mean,
against SEC caliber.
Deshaun Kaiser went 79 yards for one time, so I didn't think that.
Deshaun Kaiser was fast, man. He
was not Jaden Daniels.
He was fast.
Deshaun Kaiser. I don't think high speed than Jaden Daniels.
No, I don't think he's that there. So that's why it's tough, because I think there isn't quite a guy that really stands out to me as like, this is the exact guy that when I'm thinking of him physically, just in terms of a runner and the arm. But I think just like,
what about Bo Nix? What about Bo Nix? The good
that's
Bo
a pretty
Nix.
good one too. Yes.
Yeah.
The Oregon Bo Nix. Bo Nix. Yeah. I think that is a pretty good one, Mike. Yeah. Especially too, because I think that he has that same kind of thing where Bo Nix really that deep ball, obviously got it from his dad, because I remember his dad just dropping those, deep balls back in the day at Auburn under Terry Bowden. And just the ability to escape and kind of create something, but he's also looking to pass when he's escaped first. Because that's the thing too. It's like, I think everybody thinks that he's going to be Leonard in that way, like where Leonard was always, almost to his detriment, was, always just going to run. And Minchie is going to look to make the play down the field first, and then he'll run.
You had to bring up Terry Bowden, man. I'm sorry. back when I lived here and Terry was actually the coach, we used to call him Fat Terry Pumpkinhead. I don't know why we just did, because he had a big fat head. So I'm sorry. I don't know why I bring that up, but that's what we used to call him. So it used to get rowdy over at the Frank household back before it moved to South Bend. It got pretty damn rowdy over there on football Saturday. And I mean, we would start at like 9 a.m, and then we were up watching the very, very late Fox game that didn't get over until like 2 a.m. The Oregon State game before Oregon and Oregon State were any good. So yeah. All right, folks, that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed the show. We will talk to you next week, and hopefully we'll have a bunch of recruiting news, and hopefully it's all good news. And thanks, Christian, for coming on. It was glad to have you on here, and I'm sure everybody appreciated it. I hope Greg is winning his tournament, or Greg's daughter is winning his tournament, or winning her tournament right now. We'll have him back next week. But thanks for everybody. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.